Welcome to the Generation Elevation podcast, a conscious, connected platform for those who are ready to manifest their dream life. I'm your host, Elise Riley, a former PT, now motivational speaker, igniting empowerment and transformation all across the globe. Here at Generation Elevation, we are committed to bringing you the most inspiring guests who will share their stories, wisdom, and advice to help you progress closer to living a life of your own terms. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Elevation. I am your host, Elise, and today I have an incredible guest to share with you all. This guest grew up in a small country town and was outcasted and bullied at 10 years old. This man turned his difference into drive. During school, he became a professional sports commentator at only 13 and a national motorsport team manager by 18. At 19, while in uni, he also added training national athletes to his list while becoming a sports journalist. He began teaching at university at just 21 in the field of sport, science, and physiology, and launched his first major business at 22 and upskilling allied health professionals. After spending multiple years in and out of hospital from 21 to 25, including 2 near-death experiences, this began his awakening to the truth, realizing that despite all the external achievement, he had no internal fulfillment. His pain became his purpose, and he is now an identity coach, rewiring subconscious minds of his clients globally through his program, The Identity System, which has developed from his near-death experiences and subsequent awakenings. This human, he has a giant heart, and it is absolute honor to have him on my podcast today. So with that said, I would love to introduce to you Todd Jarratt. Woo!
Wow. Hello.
Hello.
Wow. This is amazing. I like this guy you just spoke about.
That's good. You'd want to like that guy.
So good.
How are you going today?
I'm excited. Yeah, and I'm honored to be here. As soon as we spoke and reached out, I was like, yep, how can we do this? How soon can we do it? So yeah, I'm excited to bring all the value I can to the listeners and have some fun along the way.
Yeah, it is honestly a pleasure to have you on board the Generation Elevation train, Todd. I'm so excited to have you here today. So usually I start my guest interviews with a couple of questions because I'm sure the listeners heard your bio and are probably now thinking, who's this guy? So, Todd, where'd you grow up? Small country town.
Yeah, so a little town called Hay in outback New South Wales. It's like halfway between Sydney and Adelaide. Got a population of like 2,000 people. Second flattest place on earth, actually. So, yeah, it's like just like as flat as a desk for like 600 Ks.
Yeah. And you got into the world of professional sport and like commentating, which you mentioned like national motorsport team. So like, is that motocross for those of people that don't know?
Yeah. So motocross was my background. That's what I grew up competing in. So from like the age of 8, I played a little bit of soccer and rugby, but then motocross became the focus and did that till I was around 20. Yeah, around 20 was when I kind of like put the focus into the other areas of commentary and the journalism and building that kind of side of it. But yeah, motocross, dirt bikes, lots of injuries. Yeah, dumb sport to get into.
Love that. Okay, so I'm curious, how did you get from the flattest town ever to onto the Queensland, the sunny coast?
Ooh, so I lived in Hay until the end of primary school, and I was really cool. I got ducks at primary school, so I actually went away to a boarding school and lived there Monday to Friday. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to keep racing motocross. So I didn't go away to like a Sydney or a Melbourne school. I went to a school like 2 hours towards Sydney called St. Francis Regional College, and went there in boarding school till year 10, and then had a pretty horrific motocross accident, lacerated my kidney. And that was technically, it wasn't like a near death experience, but I nearly died, like could have. The doctors were like, how the heck are you still here? When I was just turned 16. And then, so I couldn't continue a boarding school. So I went back to Hay because I couldn't go to boarding school in case I got impacted or hit, like I wasn't under supervision. And if that was the case, basically like the skin around my kidney was the only thing holding my kidney intact. It was in 3 pieces internally. And if that skin burst, the fascia is a technical term, I would have bled out internally. So they were like, it was like 6 weeks of not getting out of bed and 3 months of no physical activity. So went back to Hay, finished high school there, went down to uni in Bendigo, did my 3 years there. And then how I actually came to the sunny coast was I had my sights set on interning as a strength and conditioning coach at Stanford University in America in the Olympic sport program and the NFL program. But to do that, to get into a university or college at the level of Stanford in America is few and far between, so rare, even if you're an American. And for me, I was, an Australian, so they don't take visa, like the whole visa issue and students and this, that, and the other. There was really no way for me to do it, but I'm so committed to what I set my mind to and what I set myself to that I was like, I'm going to make this happen. And I found a way. I found a guy that was actually up here on the sunny coast. He was American. He'd interned at Stanford previously. So I was like, I'm going to intern with that guy and I'll get a letter of recommendation. So I came up here, was intending to be on the sunny coast for 2 weeks just to do enough for him to go, this kid knows his stuff. Yep. Because he still knew the performance team at Stanford. And when I came up, they were like, wow, for a 20-year-old at that point, like, your stuff. Do you want to like run the PT courses up here? Do you want to teach at the university? Do you want to train your athletes and consult from our facility? And then obviously, still go to Stanford. And I was like, wow, because at that point in time, I was basically running the athlete academy down in Central Vic in Bendigo. And that's how it started. I was just like, it's too much of an opportunity because I wanted to learn from these guys because they were already teaching at the university and they'd already interned at Stanford and were, world champion powerlifters and things like that in different areas that I could come and learn from. So that's what brought me up here. That's how I got from Hay to the sunny coast. And I've been here since start of 2017.
Wow, that's awesome. And last question, what is something that you are grateful for this week so far?
Integrity in tough conversations. Yeah, 100%. I've been really stepping into that space of this is exactly what I know I'm supposed to do on this earth. This is who I'm supposed to be. And I can't allow that to be compromised. And with that comes tough conversations. And I've been having to have a few of those in the different, communities and circles that I'm blessed to be a part of. And that's been massive. It's really interesting, actually, on that topic of gratitude. Andrew Huberman, who's a professor at Stanford in psychology and physiology, he did some research and pulled a whole lot of data around gratitude. And they actually found that the most effective gratitude practice isn't thinking about the things that we have or the things that we're grateful for ourselves, but it's actually the process of giving and receiving. So my gratitude practice of a morning now is actually going through and practicing gratitude for the love that I made. I'm grateful that these two get to show each other, like my mum and dad. I'm grateful for that mum and dad have that loving connection. Or I'm grateful for seeing my friend do that kind deed for, someone else within our circle the other day. And it's incredible the difference that it creates, like in your heart and how you feel. So there's an interesting note. There's a really good episode by Andrew Huberman on his podcast about gratitude.
I love that. So it's not just like, I'm grateful for this, and this that I have, but it's also things outside of your own experience as well.
Yeah, it's more actually the giving and receiving of something that would create gratitude or appreciation. So it's typically outside of the self. So you can be grateful for, I can experience gratitude for you having reached out for us to be in this place. And then what I actually feel is rather than me having a thing, it's actually the gratitude for you. And that creates more compassion and more love and more appreciation. It's really interesting, like the different areas of the brain that were lit up when they went through these things. So highly recommend people listening to that podcast.
Yeah, awesome. I'll have to note that down and listen to it myself. So I'm sure the listeners are curious, especially after your bio at the start, how I introed you about your story. Like, how did you go from going like that mindset, that drive to a focus for Stanford, and now doing what you do, becoming a identity coach?
Yeah, it's to give the version that I guess is clear and concise, because I could talk for 2 hours on what's gone on the last 5 or 6 years. But basically, now having the awareness and the work that I've been through over the last sort of 7 to 10 years in the personal development space, I became very aware that I was quote unquote successful, very successful for my age, and doing the things that I was doing, which was awesome. But I was doing it from a place of lack. I was doing it from, I need to achieve this thing. I need to be different. I need to get that appreciation or validation to not feel pain. Because what I, realized through the process was that if I wasn't growing, learning, or developing, that the internal dialogue that I had going on, the little voice in my head, was, you're weak, you're vulnerable, and you're inadequate. They were the three main things that came up. And it was a process to get to those, but that's, where it really stemmed from. So I was incredibly driven and motivated, and in that, that positive mindset, motivation space. And that's how, I used to train athletes and everything in that space, which was awesome. And I guess through the journey working with the athletes, whether, was really fortunate to get to work with world champions and gold medalists and NFL players, all different codes of sports at that level, and learned a lot. But the primary thing that I was realizing was the difference between world champion and fourth in the world wasn't their physical training. It wasn't their equipment. It wasn't necessarily the team around them, because almost all of those things were identical. What it was the thing between their ears. It was where they were at mentally. And this really shone forth with one of my particular, he was a national athlete here in Australia, and he had a situation where he won a championship by default. Basically, his competitors got injured and their bikes blew up in the final race of this championship. So he didn't intend to win, but kind of did, because they, crashed out and couldn't finish. And when I found out his response when he won the title, it was like disbelief. And that's when I started going, this is why he hasn't been winning all of these, all the races this year at nationals, and he was finishing, say, third to fifth, because he was wired to be a third to fifth guy. And that's when I started going, this is where I need to put all of my focus and attention. The physical training is like baseline. I can do that easy enough, but this is where there's so much to learn. And that became my passion. And I guess was teaching at the uni and training athletes and running their mentorship back, here on the sunny coast for a couple of years, and then was basically just working myself again from that mindset, go, drive, achievement, success, and all of those things, which at the point in time was amazing, but it was coming from the wrong place without the awareness, that mindful awareness. And I just essentially burnt my body out multiple times, and that put me in and out of hospital for a couple of years. And as it says in the bio, like 2 near-death experiences. One, objectively, looking back now, I probably wouldn't have died. They would have saved me via surgery. But there was a 6 to 8 month period where all I was contemplating day in and day out was like, am I going to survive this day or not? How's my body going? And that's what led me down the path of, I was realizing that no matter what I was doing nutrition wise or sleep wise or, movement wise, stepping away from work, I stopped work for 6 to 8 months just to be in that healing space, that my body wasn't getting better and I wasn't responding to the heavy medication that I was on. And that's when I started to go, there's something in my mind that's not aligned. Yes, I can have success. But when I had that first experience where the doctors and the surgeons walked into the room while my mum was on speakerphone and said, you've got the 24 to 48 hours to live if things don't go well, that was the moment where things shifted for me. And I don't wish that upon anyone, but it's been the greatest blessing, because it enabled me to go, of all the things I've done and all the places I've seen and the incredible people I've worked with, does any of that really matter in the face of what I'm experiencing right now? And I was like, no, none of it does. And that's when I realized I had all of the external achievement in the world for myself, but there was no internal fulfillment. And I guess you would say that's when I had started moving into the spiritual space, you could say. So from the science, being the uni lecturer and in physiology, to going to the opposite, very much like a Joe Dispenza story or a Bruce Lipton or a Dr. Espen in that way, that process. And during my journey back to health, I realized that I'd lost everything in my life. I'd lost my health. I'd lost my friends, my associates. I'd lost my business because I'd had to, I'd stopped everything. I'd lost those that I was closest to. I'd lost everything that I'd worked all of those years so hard for. I neglected my family. I didn't have a friend circle really. I didn't have time to do things other than achieve my goals. And when I came to this point of losing everything, it was this big realization of who am I now? When I was down in the care of my parents for 6 months in Victoria in 2020, I was bedridden for 6 or so months. I couldn't walk. There was periods where I couldn't feed myself and whatnot. And, I'm a mindset person. That's been my journey. I'm an achiever. So when you put an achiever in bed for, I was sleeping at most times 16 hours a day, but the 18 hours or the 8 hours that I was awake each day, I was just like, what's going on? What's happening? Just analyzing everything. And that's when I came to the realization that I wasn't who I was, and I hadn't changed that from my actions, my behaviors, my beliefs, or my values. And that's when I had, I guess, that I would say a life-altering shift when I realized that it was my identity that had been shed. And then from that point, I was basically like, if I'd lost everything and all I really had was I was with my family in Victoria and I was renting an apartment on the sunny coast. That was all that I really had to Todd Jarratt anymore. And I was in that point in time where I was like, well, if I'm going to get through this, because I've got a message to share, I'm going to create my life exactly how I want it and not miss a mark. How do I ensure with certainty that I can create that? And I went through, I guess, all of the things that I'd learned over the years and then all of the things that I'd experienced, which is the most important part from what happened with the near-death experiences and the realizations and the, I guess you would say, source connections and those things, and had a whole heap of, as we would call them, downloads around how would you structure a system that if you just follow the steps, you will create all that you desire. And that's really what I put my time and effort into in creating. And then I had a couple of clients. At that point, I didn't really want clients because I was still laid up in a bed most of the day throughout this period. But a couple reached out and I started working with them and was implementing the identity system just because it's what I had that was working incredibly for me and where I was at mentally and my vision. And took guys that were employees to launching 4 businesses and earning like $4 to $6 million within 2 months, and which is crazy to think back now of that result, and taking pro athletes from nearly retired to second in the world again within a 3-month period, and just these remarkable, phenomenal results and experiences that I was like, this isn't me doing the work. This is them just doing the system. And so that's really my number one mission in life now. I know that I'm partnered with incredible people like Cool to Be Conscious and the Ripple Effect and Dr. Espen, but the one thing I've said to all of them is my number one importance in life is to have the identity system out to the public, because I know that it will shift so many people's lives and largely the personal development space in the way we do things. So that's where I'm at now, and that's, I guess, been the journey. It's not really been I want to bring this thing out to the world. It's not like when people want to do it for a business return. For me, it's like, this isn't a want. There's a lot of me that's like, it's a need. It's like the world needs this. People need this. And I know that that's exactly why I've gone through to experience the dark, to have been from the science, to go to the opposite side of it, the feeling, the intangible, the spiritual side, to uncover this other part of myself, and then to bring those together and to understand that, and then be able to create a system that, the word I use, and I know my Nan, Nan listens to all my podcast interviews. She called a while ago and left me a voice message. She was like, I'm so proud of you, Todd. Oh my gosh, all the things you're sharing and saying. And she was really emotional. And then she goes, but I'm really disappointed. And I was like, oh my, that just like knife. Oh, what have I done? You swear far too much. And so this, on the video, I've got this little rubber band now on my wrist. So anytime I swear, it's like a rubber band on the wrist to remind me to not do that, so it doesn't upset Nan. So the way I explain the system, this identity system, and what I'm doing now is that's unstoppable.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'm at now, and what I guess you would say my mission is to enable people to truly create the freedom in their life in all areas, not just in one of the 10 or three of the 10, but all 10 areas of their life, feeling free, feeling invigorated, feeling liberated, feeling fulfilled, feeling joy every single day, energized and happy and free of triggers and attachments and things of that nature. And I know that that's why I'm here and what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm grateful that I can be here speaking about it right now.
I can feel your passion. Like I have a similar like fire in my heart. It's like not just wanting to do this podcast or share that message. It's like this is your mission on this planet in this lifetime to do this right now. Like it's almost like you don't have a choice because your body, your soul is gonna just continue anyway, you know?
Well, but to speak to that, the identity system, like I've been implementing that on myself since midway through 2020. So what, 18 months roughly ish. And all of the things that have manifested in my life and all of the people that have come in and all of these amazing experiences have been primarily because I'm embodying my identity. I'm not doing a thing outside of myself. It's just who I am now. And the one thing that has kept coming up was the identity system is internally ready. All the structure, the materials, the inventory is done. But I haven't launched it out. And it's been this like, again, this is like back in the day, I'm like, I just got to go for it. But now I know that, you get the feeling when it's time. And I've been putting it off, and people have been like, when are you going to launch this thing? Because I've got there's 80 people on the wait list right now from last year that are still, it continues to kind of grow. And I've just been like, it will come when it's supposed to. And about a week, just over a week ago, I was at an experience, like a ceremony. And those listeners that know of light language, I was channeling through an experience in light language, and
Cool.
This particular word kept coming up over and over and over towards the end, and I could get this feeling, and it's plastered everywhere in my home at the moment. Here's a little one for you. It's Aya Sunday, which in this terminology, this reference is, it is time. And it just like blew through me, and I was like, okay. So after the last, at least 12 months of people being like, when are you going to bring this out for people publicly rather than just with your private clients? I've got the launch date finally is the 28th of March. So it's like, holy.
Yes.
It's all coming. It's been a journey, but I'm so excited for people it's not even excited. It's deeper than that. It's that need. It's literally like a need within of, it's like, this needs to get to people, because I know once those have been taken through the system, they feel it, they experience how transformative it is and how simple the process is, that they'll be like, wow, we need to share these with others. And that's what my mission is this is not a Todd thing. This is, I'm blessed to have created this from the hardship that I've been through. Then I get to take it to the first group. They experience it. And from those that want to become an identity coach, they can. And then from there, it's identity coaches around the world. It's not one person. It's the system that does the work. And that, I feel like, is a legacy that I'm here to leave. So yeah,
Wow.
excited.
I can feel like the power like from here. Like I know that is just going to have a humongous impact on the world, and I am truly just celebrating you from here right now. Like that is amazing, and I cannot wait to witness you when that does come out and launch. Like that's going to be epic. So on that, identity coaching, identity system, Todd, what specifically is an identity in your terms?
Beautiful question. Identity is the view of oneself, but it's not only the view. And the reason I use the word view is because it's easy for people to harness. It's, if you've read Psycho-Cybernetics with Maxwell Waltz, he terms it as self-image, and other coaches, there's self-concept in the world. So self-image, self-concept, the view of oneself. However, to me, the identity is the deepest part of the human experience. It is, if I was to put a definition next to identity, it's who I am. That's it. But who I am creates everything above that. The who creates the values. It then creates from there by default the beliefs, which creates the behaviors, which creates the actions. So to me, the identity is the second most powerful thing in the world, the second most important tool that through experience that I've come to uncover. And number one, and I'll speak to this to give the reasoning behind this. Number one is presence, because pain only resides outside of presence. Whenever we have an emotional experience, the emotion is, other than the first 90 seconds of the actual nervous system experiencing, if it's a physical pain in that way, it's because our mind is in focusing on the future and what we're losing from the future, or the past and what we've had in the past. And this point of presence, when you're fully present, there is no external pain. And I've been able to experiment this and test this in myself through what's going on with my body physically. When I was, down to 52 kilos, the lightest I'd been since year 3 in primary school, I was there and I was just a bony mess. And because I was present, there was no pain. And if there was like a physical pain that I was experiencing, I was just present to it. And so there wasn't a mental suffering. And most of the human condition is mental suffering, not necessarily physical suffering. The anxiety, the depression, the worry, the codependency in relationships and all of these things is due to attachment outside of the present. And for me, what's been a part of my journey was that after the first, when the doctors told me I had the 24 to 48 hours to live, that's when, as I said, I had that shift. And I knew that there was something going on mentally. And that's when I was like, okay, there's something more here. And if the listeners have seen Doctor Strange, if you haven't,
I definitely
haven't seen Doctor Strange, you need to watch Doctor Strange. If you have, you'll get this. So when Dr. Stephen Strange has tried everything with his hands, and then they say, you can't be healed, you can't be cured, it won't work. And then he goes, there's something else. And that was that point for me where I was like, there is something else. And so I went into Vipassana meditation courses, and I've sat 4 of those 10-day silent retreats now. But what I realized through that journey was that the monks in the world are the happiest people on the planet, and they have the least. There's no attachment. They have 3 robes, a begging bowl, and their personal hygiene utensils, and that's it. They don't own anything. They don't have labels, and they're deeply fulfilled and happy because they're so present, and they've been able to pull away from the craving and the aversion that most of humanity lives in. And so for me, going through these courses, I was really pulled after my first course. I was like, I want to go to India now. And after my second course, I spoke to the masters and said, I want to become a monk. What do I need to do to ordain as a monk? Where do I need to go? What would the process involve? And I was very genuine about that. And then when I sat my 4th course, the same question arose. And when I had a few people then around in my circle going like, you have so much to share, I really sat with that, and I was like, this is true in the way of, if I felt as though if I was to go and ordain and become a monk and live as a monk, that I was very much 100% on the process of enlightenment for myself. But I was like, my life is of service to others. And I don't feel like me doing the work for me is getting the message out as much as it could be. And so what then occurred and by my 4th course, I'd already created the identity system. So these things were all flowing, and I was just going in the course I actually did my 4th course to check in to see if I still had that same deep pull to go and ordain, because there was quite a gap. There was like 12 months between my 3rd and 4th course. And obviously that's when a lot of things happened, being down in the care of my parents. And it was at that point in that course, just as I came out of it, that I experimented with this presence, the answer of presence. And the reason for that was I was at the end of a relationship, the woman that I thought I was going to marry, that I thought was my life partner. And I set an experiment, because for me, I was like, wow, because there was attachment for me, future wife, this is what we're going to have, this is what we're going to create. Yeah. And coming out of the Vipassana, it was that day that I came out that we split up. But because I was so present, there was no attachment. She was like, we need to talk. And I was like, I'm all good. Okay, let's talk. We'll go for a walk. And literally, we went for a walk and we're sitting there like laughing and talking. And she's like, are you serious? Like, what's going on? Like, where's Todd gone? This doesn't seem right. Like I'd already spoken to my sisters to plan to move into their place tonight because I was sure that you were going to kick me out. You wanted nothing to do with me because of the pain it would cause you. And I was like, no, I realized during the course that if I'm anywhere other than present, that's where the pain occurs. And so I said to her, and I said to my mum at the time, my housemate, I said, I'm going to do a 5-day experiment. And anytime an emotion starts to come up that doesn't feel good, I'm going to check myself, come back to presence. And then at the end of the 5 days, if I feel like I've got all of this suppressed emotion, I know it was just suppression. But if I get out at the end of the 5 days and I feel awesome, then I know it's just presence is the answer. It was just any attachment to what we'd had or what we could have had. So what the past or the future. And I went through that 5 days and was incredible. And I haven't had any emotional challenge from it since in that process because I was able to just be present. And so that's when I was like, number one thing for humanity is presence. But there's very few people in the world that are ready to take that step to go and ordain as a monk or to go and sit of a Vipassana course at that level. And so I was like, okay, I guess you would say the role and the intention of a monk is to diminish or dissolve their ego, to become more of their higher self or their soul or their spirit, as they say, quiet the mind because the mind is the ego. And this is where I realized that the identity is the ego. Because the identity is just the accumulation of all of the past experiences and the past stories and patterns that make up who I am from what I've been through. And this is where I was like, okay, if I can't get people to dissolve their ego by going to this place, the next best thing I can do for the world is implement this system for them to transform their ego to serve them in the highest way so that their ego, their identity is servient to them and to those around them. And that's when I was like, we've got to do this. We've got to do this in a really big way. And that's the principle of it all. It's the identity is the ego, but we can recondition our ego. And there's obviously different processes. It's just through the work that I've done over the years, this has been the most efficient and effective. And I guess you would say, as I said, unflappable process that has been uncovered. Yeah.
Wow. I have so many questions. Okay, so in regards to presence and how you were saying that by cultivating being present in the moment, you don't have to experience pain. And or if an emotion comes up that is not feeling good, if you have that presence, then it's like it will go away. And then over the 5 days, you said you felt awesome. However, if you felt not so great, it would have been that suppression. So I'm sure the listeners are curious about, there's a term, especially in the personal development space, on choosing your emotions and choosing to be happy. And there's a lot of that word thrown around about toxic happiness. So I'd love it if you could speak on that and like your being at cause in your life.
Yes, 100%. So to me, presence isn't a happy or a sad state, a positive or a negative state. It just is the state. But the thing is, and again, this is going deeper into the things. So for those that may be newer to this space, like, yeah, I guess this, it might be a bit of like, oh, okay, that's a bit off the science side of things. But from the experience I've had and from the monks and the masters that I've been able to ask these questions with and learn from, it is that when we are present, the state that we're in, it's like, those times when you're just taking in the sunset or you're just taking in the beach or whatever it is, you're just like, And so if that is the state where there's no thought outside of the moment, and that's where we are, then that is what the core to it is. So to me, what I guess I've uncovered is that when you're in that state of presence, the attachment to the label of an emotion even dissolves. So there's not a happy or a sad, there's just, I just am here. I'm just here.
I love that you said that. I spent New Year's with a Tibetan monk
Oh, stop it!
I know. Anyway, I was chatting
Where
to.
were you?
That's another story for another day.
Oh no, I need another podcast.
Another podcast, yes.
Oh.
And he was just so fascinating. We were having this beautiful conversation and we were talking about happiness. And I was asking him, like, yeah, how are you? And he's like, I just am. I was like, cool. That's so cool. I love it. So yeah, that was really cool. And in regards to how you said, okay, that presence, and then moving away from the science to the spirituality aspect of it, and especially with your ego and identity. Obviously, you spent a lot of time with athletes and in that very masculine energy space, and now shifting that, you're shifting your identity and evolving into your higher self. I guess my question is to you, and I'm like, I ask this on behalf of the listeners who are stepping into that spirituality space and potentially have the people around them commenting on how maybe it's a little bit woo or things like that. I'd love to hear your experience.
Yeah, for me, as again, my story is or experience is very different to most because of the extent to which my life has been one way and then the other. Incredible, awesome achievement, and like, yeah, we're fucking king. Oh, I just feel like, dang it, man. Sorry, Nanny. To the other side of like the near death and being in the care of your parents when you're 24 for 6 months, like being bedridden. My experience of moving into the spiritual wasn't as such listening to podcasts and coming of it from people around me. I was like forced, like my ego had to die in the times when the second time around, when I had the 2 weeks of it, like I didn't get out of bed for 2 weeks. That period of time was when that would be like, that was the crux of the ego dissolution experience. And that to me was when my spirituality, I guess you would say, really was exploded. It had already started with going into the meditation courses. And I guess to speak into that, to your question for the listeners, I experienced some segregation and some judgment from my family, actually, because I'm from a Christian background. And these Vipassana courses are a Buddhist, Burmese Buddhist tradition. And so there are actually people within the family worried, like, oh, we're losing him to Buddhism and this and that. And so that was a bit of a challenge for me at first. And there was some, to begin with, there was some triggers. And then as I've gone through more and more, I was like, there's nothing to be triggered about here. There's just, a thought of this or that. And so the part of that, I guess my journey internally was, for me spiritually, was primarily within. But I do remember the first time, because actually when I was back down in Bendigo and I was at the point where I could at least get out of bed for like 5 hours a day. And I was like, this is my thing. I was like, I could be out of bed for like, let's say 6 hours on a Saturday, and I'd rest for like Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday to be able to do this before and after. But I was like, I want to serve. So I reached out to a couple of the crew and community from Bendigo that were close to me through my journey. And I said, hey, let's do like cold immersion and do this breathwork stuff on a Saturday morning at my mum and dad's place in Bendigo. And I was still like I was still a mess physically, and that's about all I could give for a whole week. But I still remember so clearly the first time that they came down and were in like the back pool shed, and there was actually first week there was 2, and the next week there was like 12. So the second week, when I first spoke, because all of these people knew me from the past background of like training athletes, because that's where when I'd last really been based in Bendigo, training athletes, doing the commentary, doing the journalism, being the go, being the motivation mindset guy, to then have them coming in and sitting down and me being about to speak into like breath work and our higher self and truth and these other areas. I was so nervous because I was worried about that judgment. What are they going to think of me now? And because I was that person, I was like, fuck, it's war again. Me, I'm aware. is this guy's gonna be like a woo-woo hippie? Because that's what I used to think. Now I just didn't get it, because that's, when you're in that space of the science, that's where you're at. And so I was really worried. But what I did was speak into that. And that's how I was able to overcome it from the beginning, was just go, okay, I'm feeling nervous right now. I'm feeling worried about judgment. Where is that coming from? Okay, it's coming from a worry that they're not going to want to be around me in the future, not here and now. So like, what is here and now? I want to speak my truth. So I said to them, hey, I want you to know that you being here means the world to me. And obviously you guys know what I've been through the last 6 months. I need to speak through what's come up in that time. And it's very different to my background. And I just want you to show I'm nervous about speaking about spirituality or breath work or, consciousness. But this is what I need to share. And they were just like, Toddy, we will support you in whatever you need, whatever you want. And because to me, I'd been a mentor to most of these guys when I was down in Vic before that. So I had that support, and that was incredible for me, because then when I came back to the sunny coast, I was just like, if there was people I was catching up with, I was like, I've been on a journey and I have shifted. And I just want you to know that I am nervous in becoming this person, but I know it's who I'm supposed to be. So I feel like in that way, if there are people listening that have been having that pull, or they've been nervous, or they're worried about what people might say, is just speak into it. Let them know. Because when you express authentically and vulnerably, people empathize. They feel that. They are compassionate. And it's really when we do the thing and don't speak up that we get worried about it. And when we actually speak into it, we realize like, oh, they don't really care. Like, they actually understand more so.
Yeah, oh, I'm literally like nodding my head away as you speak, because I can really resonate with that entirely, especially being from Vic myself and being a personal trainer. I was in a long-term relationship. I left all that behind and moved up to the Gold Coast by myself, and then headed
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, and I did all this mindset stuff. I started delving deep into that, and then uncovering all the things light language, all the things downloads, and I guess spiritual stuff in layman's terms. And I was having all these experiences, and I was only really sharing it with maybe 2 or 3 close friends, because I wasn't even sure of the experiences myself. I was getting like messages to go this place at this time or write this down. And all of these things started coming into my experience. And then one day I just decided that, you know what, like I'm going to start sharing these experiences on my story. And that initial fear come up of, what if I get judged by the people back at home? They're not used to this version of me. I'm so being portrayed in the past as that personal trainer, the girlfriend, that shy girl, like, to then be stepping into like my confident, powerful, magical self. It was like, ooh, that little bit of resistance there. And I wanted to actually briefly speak on when I really just leaped in on that was when I was going to Sunny Coast for the first time with my friend Ali. She's like, come to Ziggy Albert's. I was like, yeah, all right. Went there, and it was live music, especially like I was so excited to just see some music live because it had been so long. And then the next morning I went to Cool to Be Conscious and then saw you.
Yeah.
And then I was saying to Todd before everyone that Todd was really like a major puzzle piece in, I guess, where I am today and how I've met everyone and become a part of the ripple effect. And it was really interesting that our paths had crossed like briefly before we'd even got to Gold Coast. However, when we were at that like Cool to Be Conscious day on the beach, we kind of was like, oh yeah, like we know each other. And then it was just evolved from there, which is really cool.
Oh, agreed. And it's like, it's for the listeners, I guess, yeah, we're both down in Vic, we're both from similar areas. We're actually in like the same circle without even realizing at the time. And then, yeah, to have come up and that day at Stillness when you came up at the end. And as I said, like I don't think we hadn't met. We still haven't worked this out if we ever did, like just like whatever. Anyway, and then as we said, like we were just chatting away and I was like, I feel like I know you though. And it's just like, to me, it's like past life. Yep. Okay. Check that one off. But then like just being like, hey, you should come to this Morgan event this afternoon. And you're like, what's it about? Oh, mindset, personal development. Okay, I'm in. And like, you're there, and look at you now, like you've MC these events and you're a part of the whole crew. It's just been incredible. So,
Yeah.
oh,
And that was
yeah.
all off trusting that intuition, those downloads, and really accepting myself. So that whole experience I then shared on my stories. And I think because I fully accepted that part of me, I then reflected that energy, that frequency out onto everyone else. Same as you, when you become in the present moment and realize, you know what, I need to speak my truth, that then like reflected back to you through your reality. And you got all that support like I did as well, which is really cool.
100%.
So I'm curious, what would be some of your tips for the listeners on how to cultivate more presence, especially like in challenging times as well?
Okay, I love this. Thank you for asking this question. Travi boy was bang on. He was like, she's a good host. She asks good questions. I'm like, yes, she does.
Love you, Trav.
Yeah, shout out. So the first one for me is becoming present to your breath. So let's say in a day-to-day situation, if you're feeling a bit run off your feet or a bit rushed, or you're having a tough conversation or something's uncomfortable, whether it be with the kids, if you're at that age, or if you're more of our age and you're on that journey, if you're like, I've got to achieve all these things, I've got to get all these things done, we actually perform best in presence. So when that does occur for me, what I bring myself back to is the awareness of breath at my nose. And this is a specific technique called anapana. And it's the first 5 days of a Vipassana retreat meditation course. Is literally 10 hours a day for 5 days straight. You just sit and meditate on the air coming out the end of your nose. And that is all you do. You don't think of a feeling or an emotion or a sensation or allow your thoughts or cultivate gratitude or think about, you literally just keep your awareness on your nose. That's it. And so one of my masters, and this was like one of the greatest gifts I've been shared with, and that's why I'll share it with you guys, is he was like, don't practice breath work, live a breathwork practice. Ooh. Which is to say, always be aware of the breath. And so for me, it started out as like, if I'd pull up at the lights, and he said this, he's like, pull up at the lights. And when you're sitting there, rather than thinking, sit and feel the air just moving in your nose and out your nose. And that's as simple as that. And that's what the monks meditate on. So that's number one for bringing that state of presence, because as soon as you're aware of the breath in and out your nose and you're sitting with that awareness, you're not anywhere else in your thoughts, because you have to be present on that. So that's the first key. The second key to cultivating presence is, to me now, it's like whether it be a mantra or having a physical reminder. So the necklace that I'm wearing, I was never a necklace person, but this has a specific meaning to me now. It's a crystal and a broken half. And so I have on the top, or I should say on the bottom is past, on the top is present, is future. And then in the middle, that center line where there's a gap, is presence. And so if I ever feel like I'm out, I just grab a hold of that and remind myself. So it's more so the awareness, the self-coaching of going, oh, I'm thinking about things, I'm not here and now. And then for me, it's once you've got that, it's to the breath, or having that, same thing with the rubber band. It can be, having a simple little, it might be for other people, implementing a little rubber band. Those simple cues is first and foremost, but to become present or to become aware, to actually implement the breath or to implement the rubber band or the necklace or whatever it is, that's secondary to actually being able to be aware of the mind. So my first tool is start to breathe, breath work, and meditate, because you can't become aware of something that doesn't stop running. You can't actually stop it. And so meditation and breath work slows it down. So the more you practice it, the more it becomes more of a homeostatic place, baseline state. And that's the first thing. Start those practices, and then it becomes more simple.
I love that so much. And for those that are listening who may potentially just have only recently heard of breathwork or meditation and haven't started doing it in their routine yet, but thinking about it, I guess, what is the point? What is the purpose of breathwork? What is the purpose of meditation in like a brief summary?
Yeah. Oh, I like that brief.
I know we're going to make another podcast on that.
So, I'll touch on the science because I can keep it brief. Basically, the top of the brain, the cerebral cortex, and the prefrontal cortex, just think like the top part and the front of the brain, is where all the thinking and the analysis, the monkey mind is going on. It's always talking. And breath work, as an example, creates a state where that part of the brain quietens down. So that the technical term is transient hypofrontality, which basically just means that there's like a temporary loss or decrease in blood flow to that part of the brain. And so breath work, there's all different types of breath work, but if we start there, the intention of breath work is actually to decrease the thinking mind and to actually bring us into a more present state. And it's not just for presence. Obviously, for example, with, let's say, a Wim Hof as an example, you're oxygenating the body, which is alkalizing the blood, and it's increasing our capacity with the breath holds, with carbon dioxide tolerance, which actually increases our fitness without even training. The results I've seen taking athletes through carbon dioxide tolerance training is nuts. Like world level athletes that have had like 12% increases in VO2 in like a week, which is like unheard of within training literature. Yeah, so big proponent in that. And then obviously you've got things like holotropic breath work, which is more about going deep into that to the point where that part of the brain really does stop and you're more connected with your subconscious or your soul or your spirit, and you can have these deeper experiences. Meditation, it depends on what style of meditation, because there's mindfulness meditation, which is becoming mindful of, let's say, the moment or a mantra, or people can do Om, or people can be chanting something repeatedly. Really, the idea, though, of meditation in the forms is to create a stillness of the mind. Some meditations that many people will go through, as an example, like if you want to try breath work, just type into YouTube Wim Hof method and type in the first one that's 11 minutes long. Boom, enjoy. And then if you want to jump into meditation, Insight Timer, the app, just jump in that and just type in whatever you want to meditate on. Just like presence, click. And then it'll just give you heaps of options. Yeah, some meditations are about like creating a feeling. So they might say meditate on gratitude and cultivate that feeling, because that's a mindfulness meditation. You're mindful of the feeling. But obviously, like more of the meditation that I've been exposed to is more strict, and the monk style of meditation, which is purely about training the mind to one pointedness, called samadhi. So it's honestly, I feel like every person on the face of the planet should meditate and should breathe. And if you have, it is one for those that have meditated before and like, this is a waste of time. I get more agitated afterwards than when I am starting, because that used to be me. Yeah. I'd be like, go to a 10-minute meditation. I get 6 minutes in. I'm like, check my watch. I'm like, oh, stop this. This is a waste of time. I could be doing other things. So I'd leave and I'd be more agitated. The part is to, one, be patient. But the second part is, if you struggle with meditation, attempt breath work and then meditate, because you've already done the work in oxygenating the body where it changes the brainwave state, and then you drop into a meditation more efficiently. So there's a little hack for those jumping into the space.
Oh, so valuable. I know everyone listening is like, yes, writing all these down, making notes. I know I definitely am. And
I can actually see the pen moving, which is cool.
Oh, yes, because I'm like writing down little bits and pieces that you say, and I'm like, okay, how can I like expand on this? Because you mentioned the subconscious mind, and this is a lot of the things that I teach within my work. So I guess before we start to wrap up, I'd love for you to touch on the subconscious mind, unconscious mind, conscious mind, and how potentially, like you were saying earlier about athletes and they are wanting to be the best. However, those like beliefs of not being able to get there, and the difference of being the number one versus number three is mindset. Yeah. So I guess I'd love for you to touch on how the unconscious, subconscious mind can play a role in that.
Gotcha. Really, with the subconscious mind being, the primary driving factor behind how we live our life. It's, for many people, they kind of look at the subconscious as, secondary, or if anything, like an afterthought. But when you really break it down, and as you know this, that subconscious drives almost everything we do. And the conscious mind is only going to be that top small percentage and top small portion. For most people, they have this conscious desire to, if we're talking in the world of athletes, because that's relatable for people, they can think of an athlete. All athletes, especially those in the pro level, have a desire to be to be the greatest. But there's only ever one that gets there in each sport, in each discipline. And the primary reason underlying that, again, is, as we said, it's that subconscious, because it doesn't align, which is basically saying that there's an incongruence between the two. The subconscious is saying, I want to be number one, while the subconscious is over here saying, yeah, but you're a number 3 person. And when, as we know, like with the subconscious having 40,000 times more processing power than the conscious, and the amount of information it takes in comparison, and the amount that our subconscious is doing in driving the software within us that we don't even know, most athletes that I've started working with don't even realize what's going on within their subconscious, in the aspect of the fact that their subconscious is driving their results, and they think it's a bike issue, or it's a nutrition issue, or whatever it is. And
training hard enough.
Yeah, exactly. I need to do more.
Yeah.
But they don't. Yeah, it's two completely different things in that space. So is there anything specifically that you'd like me to break down in there? So I'd love to.
Yeah, well, I think what will be really relevant, especially with where this podcast, I guess, the whole point of this podcast is to, I guess, elevate people to their higher self, to ignite that inner fire, for them to let go of those unconscious, like, patterns that are limiting them from stepping into their true power, whether that be stepping into their new business, or going all in on a relationship, or all in on their own, like, health journey.
What to implement. Yeah. So to me, there's obviously 2 parts that rewire the subconscious. So if we're talking about the subconscious being the most important aspect for the performance and the quality of our life, which it is, the 2 things that rewire it are, number 1, and the shortest, most efficient, is emotion, heightened state of emotion. And then number 2 is repetition. So you can do either of the 2. Typically, to get into a heightened state of emotion in the correct way, by the way, guys, is to have a coach, to have someone that understands the mind and how it functions, to get you into that emotional state, but do it in the right way, that it's moving you in the correct direction, not reliving a trauma or a past experience, or creating something that doesn't necessarily serve you. That, to me, is where it's like having a coach for the heightened emotional place is hugely crucial. The other part of it in repetition to rewire the subconscious, if I was to give 2 real tools and tips in that way, it's number 1 is, for me, has been vocabulary. And with that, I mean, not only auditing out, let's say, negative, quote unquote, negative words, but also turning neutral or good words into great words. And the reason for this is because, let's say, for example, we're struggling in our relationship and our business, and we want to transform the 2. And we've been doing all of the things we can. We're doing more. We're feeling burnt out. We're feeling like when we see the partner, let's say, for example, you come in home in the afternoon and they say, how's your day been? Let's say, for example, it sucked. So we have sucked sort of roughly down the bottom. Then if you came home and they're like, how was your day? Like, yeah, it was all right. And then you've got, yeah, it was good. There's kind of like 3 levels there. On all 3 levels, we can change the word. Irrespective of the state that we're in, if we have the awareness to change the word, it changes our expression of where we're at. So rather than suck, use the word interesting. How was your day? Interesting. Because it was. Like, most things that suck are interesting because there's a reason for it. But what it's doing is creating a curiosity to it, and kind of like the aspect of, what can I learn from this? Then where it's like, it was all right, you can change that as well, and good becomes great or phenomenal. And so for me, a massive part of my journey has been auditing my vocabulary over the last 8 to 10 years, really. I first started in year 10 in high school, actually, thanks to Eric Thomas. And it's shifting words. And it takes, again, the same as, and this is the biggest point in any really area of coaching, is like it takes a point of awareness first to be able to make a change. Whether it's becoming present, you've got to be aware that you're not present first. If it's wanting to change the business dynamic, you've got to become aware to what is happening in that moment. So it's first becoming aware of what words am I using that aren't serving me. So a lot for me that I guess I use as like a general rule of thumb for people to at least start with is removing the word can't. And I get like a lot of people like can't, impossible. But for me, I just make it yet. I don't actually remove the word can't or impossible, because at this point in time, if someone said jump to the moon, I physically can't, but can't yet puts the timeline on it. So it's like when someone says, I can't do that, it's like, well, like you can't yet. How about we give it another 2 weeks? And what that does is creates that like, okay, I'll keep going, keep going. So that's a big one. And also knowing the difference between say can't and won't. Someone says, I can't jump out of a plane for skydiving. I'm like, no, you won't. You can. Like if I threw you out the door, you would.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you want to. So can't and won't are really different, because most people use the I can't excuse or rule, when in fact it's I won't. And when you actually question them on that, or when you question yourself on when you say I can't, you're like, ooh, well I can, why won't I? That's a big one. Then things such as, have a good day. Have a phenomenal day. Most people know when they get a message from me, have an absolutely incredible day. Like that's an automated response for me now. How are you? I'm phenomenal, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, mine's spectacular.
Yeah, there we go.
Woo!
Dazzled.
Yeah. I'm a magician.
Yeah. So now I've got words created showing in my head. So there's that side of things, picking apart the vocabulary. And again, it's just looking at the words that, what words make you feel a bit lower when you say them, and what could you interchange that with having phenomenal words. Have words that enable you to feel spectacular. Because when you say, if someone says to you, how are you doing? You're like, yeah, I'm all right, compared to how you doing. I'm phenomenal. Even if I'm in the same state, by me saying the word phenomenal, I feel it. It's like my chest pulls up, my shoulders pull back. I'm like, yeah. So that's, yeah. Ooh, damn.
Yeah, I like flick my hair. I'm spectacular.
So vocabulary 1, and then routines 2. Routines have been probably the second most important thing to me in this journey. And that's a large part of what's based around within the identity system. And routines can be as short as 5 minutes. They can be as long as 2 hours. So I'm pretty extensive in the way I do things in life. I go all in when I do things. So my routines are thorough. But setting a morning and an evening routine as a minimum, they can be 5 minutes. Like I said, they can be longer. But by having those, what happens is as soon as you wake up and you go into your routine, which is your time. So number 1 is like that little box device that vibrates and makes noises all day, every day. Don't touch that for the first hour to 2 hours that you're awake. Keep that away. So it's, the first hour and a half for me, if I wake at 6 till 8, I don't touch my phone. I have my speaker in my room and the music playing from my phone in the kitchen, so I don't have that distraction. But I'll be like, hey Siri, play my morning playlist, because I have a morning playlist that goes to every day, because it's like it anchors in all of the parts of me.
Yeah.
So those first 2 hours for me is me time, nothing else. What happens is every day I wake up, I know that hour to 2 hours is mine, and I'm in my state of I'm present and I love it. And I feel good, and I'm fueling my body, and I'm moving my body, and I'm doing the things that fill my cup. And what happens is, 1, that then leads into the day with momentum. You feel good, you can tick those boxes and have nailed that. But then 2 is, as you're doing it every single day, that repetition continues. And if you're doing it for, a longer period of time, it becomes more of a set point throughout the day. So you have that. And then the evening routine in the same way. Phone goes away at a particular time, then it's you time. No one else, just you, fueling you, loving yourself, giving yourself what you want. And then what happens is you're going into that state where you start to switch off, and you're going into a beautiful state before sleep. Then what happens is you now got, let's say, for example, for me, my evening routine is half an hour to an hour. And then I have, let's say, roughly 9 hours of sleep at the moment, to a 2-hour routine in the morning. So that's around 12 hours. That's half my day, because I've led in and I'm coming out in a good state. And sleep, when you've gone in that way and coming out, it's restful. So I know that that's being anchored in so much just through that repetition. And it doesn't need to have to be a massive routine or anything particular. It's just knowing that you're putting in time to do the things for yourself. I know that one of the coolest things to see is when you get a little kid to understand the importance or the power of making their bed, like young Kaya, that I get to be around a whole lot now. He's an incredible little man. And I said to him, I'm going to challenge you. I want you to make your bed each morning for the next couple of weeks. And he's like, why? I said, because what it does is, it's number one, it sets your day up great. And you can be like, yes, I did that good thing. Even if you have a rough morning, you can feel good about that. And when you come to bed, even if you've had the worst day, you can go, I still did well this morning. Yeah. And so like we talk in that way. And so the last, I think it's probably been 3 weeks now, every single day, you make your bed. Yeah, I made my bed. It's just, it's amazing. And that's like a big part of his sort of celebration each day now. So yeah, vocab and routines, huge.
Oh, so good. I love this. And for those listening, where can they find you? Like, if they enjoyed today's episode and want to know more about Todd Jarratt, where can they find you?
In a monastery, being a monk. No. No, they can find me on the beach. No. They actually posted that. Well,
next minute you'll be on the beach and I got this big crowd coming at you.
Oh, far out. Which beach? No. So I'm on Instagram. Todd_Jarratt is the page. And then I'm on Facebook, but the page is Coach Jarratt. I'm most active on Instagram in that way, and I know the guys are getting me onto TikTok now, because apparently that's important. So that's it. And I always say on podcasts, if anyone has any questions at all, to reach out, to send me a message. If it's anything to do with the identity or the identity system, as I said before, like, it's going to launch on the 28th of March now, so the wait list is there. So if people wanted more information, they can shoot me a message. And I'll always endeavour, and I say endeavour, to respond with an audio message back to people for efficiency of time. But I also want to speak into the fact that I've been pretty overwhelmed with messages the last little while, so I haven't been nailing that. So just full transparency there. If I don't get back to you straight away, that's why. But cool to be conscious, the ripple effect, Dr. Espen, I'm part of those incredible communities. And yeah, so just loving life and grateful to be able to share and serve and see others create freedom and fun and love. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I can really tell from the way you've spoken today. And I also have one last question. One more.
Okay.
So now this can be totally unrelated. I more so want the first thing that comes through, whether it's channeled unconsciously. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
What is one piece of advice that you can give the listeners today that you feel called to share? It doesn't have to be related to what we've spoken about either, but what is one piece of advice you feel called to share with them?
First thing that came through from my chest, from my heart, was practice presence, 100%. And if I was to, I guess, give something from my lived experience in that way of kind of like why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I don't ever want anyone to go through the pain, the hurt, the darkness that I've gone through. That's like my biggest driving factor. So for me, it's look at why you're doing the things you're doing, the feeling that it creates for you, whether that be getting the pay rise or getting the new car, or, in those external achievements. Sit with why you're doing that for the feeling, and then reverse engineer it and go, how can I create that feeling without having to achieve? Because it's the feeling that we all seek. And that's what I never learned before my challenges, and what I was forced to learn. So.
Wow, so powerful. Thank you so much, Todd, for your time and effort and your energy today. It has been an absolute honor having you on, and yeah, I'm sure I'll see your beautiful soul soon.
Oh, you will.
Thank you for being a part of the Generation Elevation community. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to leave a 5-star rating, written review, share, and tag me on Instagram at elise.riley. Until next time, keep loving, keep learning, and keep rising.